Well, most of all, my studio is small, and it's like a place I have to concentrate, and I'm used to it. So I been here as old as my son is, who's now 19, and it's downtown Manhattan. So every time I feel like it's too much work, I look outside of the window and I see lots of people walking by. So I feel like I'm part of the human family. And it's an old tenement building, so I feel like I'm like the old immigrants who came lower side of Manhattan when they were selling pickles and stuff. So it's sort of like lots of little things which are special for me in the studio. Usually what I like most about it's coming to the studio, because the whole city is waking up and you see like people unloading like bread and flowers, and women have like wet hair, and it's like wonderful to walk through the city in the morning, because I'm coming from the country where you just see the trees and woodchucks. And then I sort of like come here, and then I usually sketch in the morning and try to get slowly into something, because if now I get into something which is very detailed and I do it for 4 or 5 hours, it's very hard to refocus. So sometimes if I draw something detailed all day long, I walk out and then I cannot see and cannot cross the street for a little bit, because the eye muscles get like too focused. So I decided to do a book about Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, mostly because really my father, who came to New York in 1987 when I was like really just arrived to New York and getting used to it, and it was like big and noisy and overwhelming, and we took a walk in Central Park with my father, and he said, "Do you know that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote Little Prince on the Central Park South?" And I knew the book because he gave it to me when I was 12, and everybody I knew grew up with that book, and it's a book which lots of people know around the world. But I had no idea, like I didn't really think about who wrote it, and I thought it was somebody who lived in France, and I knew, I think, a little bit that he was a pilot, but not too much. But it was complete shock to me that like, what would he be doing in New York? So I wrote to the librarian in Long Island, and she sent me lots of books about where he lived. And some French woman called me and she said, "So you want to do a book about Antoine de Saint-Exupéry? He's like a saint of French people, and you cannot just like do a book like that." So she scared me a little bit off, but then slowly, from this whole anecdote, I was like sort of telling different librarians and booksellers, I said, "Do you know that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote this book in New York?" And they all said, "Oh, we had no idea." So I thought, this is cool. I have like this story which nobody knows, that in America, this book which is so famous all over the world and which people think is French, was written in America. And I think like really America should be proud that Little Prince was written in New York, and the French people go, well, it's still a French story, but it was written here. Well, I was myself sort of inspired by him, really. I thought he was a writer, and he was most of all the pilot. And I was inspired by the skies and his dreams about, he was flying in the time when he didn't really think about some schedules or airports. He was flying, he would take like the girlfriends to fly from one place to another. He was really appalled when they told him, "You have to really say what time you're flying and where you're flying, and do you have the map." So I like sort of a little bit of that freedom of I like the ideas that he was born exactly when aviation was started in 1900, and then he evolves with the airplane. So he starts in the airplanes which are made of wood and cotton and have no brakes, and then actually in 1944 when he flies in the Second World War, he's in the airplane which looks pretty much like today, which has got like 149 controls, and he kind of doesn't know what oxygen and everything, it's too complicated. So he's like, he shows like the whole evolution of us as human beings, I think, and in the way he writes this most heartbreaking book. Also he writes other books which are about flying and about his friends, and he also believes so much in like how through airplanes and through working together and going from one country to another we can all live together as people. So he's this incredible belief in humanity, which sometimes I feel humbled by that, because he believed like we will all be one wonderful community connected by airplanes, and Little Princes will be, you know, it's just a wonderful, wonderful person. And that's even in the end of the book, even some people try to prove otherwise, that his airplane was found and his bracelet. I think he simply like disappeared between the sky and the ocean, like some pilots sometimes get confused what is the blue of the sky and blue of the ocean. So in the end I have him like with this childhood dream, being on the flying bicycle, he sort of goes into nowhere. Even some people say, "Well, can you point out where it was where he disappeared?" But I think it's wonderful for the writer like that to say, well, he might be on another planet under the stars.
So these are my initial ideas for the book, when I thought it would be always long pictures because it's about flying, that I would keep his face as a little boy throughout the book because he was sort of a little boy most of his life. I thought he would be chasing like little blue feather because it would be like a motif which goes through the book. This was one of the first storyboards. It's lots of things are the same. Then I thought he must be a baby which is born with the wings, because this was the announcement I did for my son when he was born, which I thought like he's gonna be a little angel, and I thought he always was interested in flying, so I had him on the swing, and these were the little doodles when he built a bicycle, which then is in the book, and you see they are just like the doodles of him flying, and I thought it's some dragons chasing him, because he always talked how his mother kept him safe in the bed and how she was smoothing the sheet, and these were just like different photographs and stories I was getting from different sources, and I thought when he was a young pilot he was all ready to fly all the time. And he writes about the dragons which are waiting in the mountains of South America. So I thought lots of things would look like something else, because when you're flying and you see the cities and you see the things, they look like faces. And then it was more and more research when sometimes I got too much. And then I thought, this is the loneliness when he flies. It was, I think, North Africa and Egypt. And then this picture, which then is in the book, it was about him sort of delivering the mail in North Africa. This was the mountains. It would be simple to do it like that. This was like South America sideways when he flies all over South America. It's a very simple idea. These are just more stories I found. Then I wanted to do like a comic strip, the whole story of his friend who gets stranded in the mountains, in the snow, and he walks. But then I realized it would be more like a comic book, and it would be too much work. So, and it would be like side story, so it would take away from the main story. This was a whole chapter about his wife Consuelo. So this is not Consuelo, but then I realized it's again they had a very sort of complicated relationship, and it wasn't. So this is when he meets Consuelo in South America. So it's like a rainforest in shape of Consuelo.